Welcome back to the Smartbuild implementation series. We're in part 12. We're going to be talking about hardware, fasteners, and related items. So in this project here, we have a metal roof. And one thing I want to look at is if we go to the job review, we're just jumping right in here and looking at some examples of hardware items, things like fasteners, screws, maybe underlayment, caulking, things like that. So that's what the main part of this video is going to be focusing on, getting items like that set up. So jumping into the setup wizard, again, if you're going through these steps, you've probably seen this menu before. So we're in settings, setup wizard, and then we can start in connectors. We'll start there to begin with. We have some generic connectors here that we're looking at, and these are just to give you ideas of again what kind of items may you put in connectors. And these are good examples, and you're welcome to edit these, add some of your own. And by editing them, you can simply click on the item, change the SKU, change the description if you want, and even maybe add your own price. So if you don't need this one or you have a similar version of it, you can use this one, and even add a vendor SKU if you want. So that's one way that you could add a connector item. You can also click the download button here, download this list. And if you do that, it'll look something like this where you have it in Excel, and you can look at the columns needed. So you could create a SKU, a description, and you can see the columns that can be empty, that aren't really necessary or not required. And then you can also have a selling unit, quantity per selling units one, and then your cost and price and taxable and weight. So you have examples here of, so if you would just want to add yours down through here and delete everything, delete these all out. And that's an easy way. And then save the file, simply come back into here and upload, and you can upload that list back into there. So that's one way to add new items if you're not familiar with that process. So next, going over into connectors, very similar, a little more in depth and a couple things to note. Try to cover everything and not miss anything here. So with connectors, there's not as many fields or not as many requirements. Fasteners, a little more complex. So the difference, and when we look at fasteners, things like nails, screws, the first thing that's usually going to be different is the selling unit, and then how many's in that selling unit. And so some people sell screws as a selling unit of each, and that's fine. And you have maybe 10 cents per screw or 5 cents per screw. And that works. We just have to figure out, what is your company process? And when you look at your part number for a screw, is that part number for a bag or is it per screw? And, just straightforward, Smartbuild, it works a lot better if this is for a SKU. The SKU here is for an entire bag or a box, and then you could put the quantity in here. And we'll get to the reasons later, but here's an example of setting this up as per bag. And again, you can follow the same process. You can download this Excel file, look at it, look at the examples, and see what that looks like. But just looking at some of these screws here, if I were changing this, and maybe you do sell screws as each, you would have your part number, you have your description, and then you could change this to each, maybe each here, and you could set the quantity to 1. And this price would probably be maybe 10 cents, whatever that is per screw. So that's one way that yours may be different. It's optional and depends on your part number system. Now, if we look at this item here and say, okay, this is each in one, and going back over into the job and look at the difference. So what other requirements are needed when setting up fasteners? So we have some fasteners here as examples that are set up as each, and some as bags. And when you're setting the assembly items up to get the correct count of screws, it makes the formulas a lot easier to set up, and then you can have the exact count rounded up to a bag. So if you sell your screws as a full bag, you obviously don't want Smartbuild to quote or only have 1.5 bags in a quote. You want that rounded up to 2, and that's where it's much easier if you just set the selling unit as a bag and give us that part number, set it up that way. So looking at like my pancake screws here, I'm just selling those as each. We just count them out, put them in a bag, and sell them that way. Or the wood binders, the metal screws, selling those as bags. So going back, other things to note with fasteners. So we have a couple of different examples here. If you go down to the bottom, you can see the wood binders, and these are the ones that are actually showing up in that job. I have this bag, and I have a quantity per selling unit of 250. Now, if you ask, well, why is that important to set this quantity per selling unit to 250? If we take a preview over into assemblies, it'll make a lot more sense. So when you're setting up an assembly and you have your primary material of an ag panel, maybe with a standard fastener, just change this name here so we could, makes more sense. So we have the ag panel with standard fastener as the assembly, and then it can be used in all these locations. So when you look at this screw, and if we use that wood binder, 1.5 inches, 2.5, use 1.5 inches here, this formula here per square foot. So I'm not having to think, okay, how many per square foot? It's just as simple as, you answer this question. So if I say 1 screw per square foot, it's very simple. Now, if I'm thinking, okay, I have a whole bag, so how many bags per square foot? Well, it would be 1 divided by 250, basically, if I were doing 1. So it gets really complex, and you have to do kind of the advanced formulas where you do, 1 divided by 250, if that were your number. And you got this 250 divided by 250 in all your formulas. And it's just a lot harder than keeping the simple formula, answering the question of, 0.8 or 1 per square foot. And then Smartbuild knows that there's automatically 250 in a bag, so it will round up to the bag based off of this formula here. So it's much easier if you leave the simple formula and understand what that's doing there. But then that has to work together with your fastener and the count. So if you're doing screws, that's where the quantity per selling unit is crucial to set that up. So you could set it up either way depending on the way your part number is, but this is the easiest. So getting into other items, things like hardware items. So the thing with screws, I guess, before we finish up screws, is that the other part is color. So when you set up a screw, chances are you may have it available in a bunch of different colors. So if you toggle colors on here, it will automatically populate every single color in your database. That's basically every color right here. So if you have shingle colors, things like that, you're going to get a lot of colors. So if we look at that and we say, well, we don't need all those colors, we just need the metal ones. You would basically have to, if you have not cleaned up your color list yet, and if you have other colors beside metal, you would need to just select and delete items that do not apply. Like all these shingle colors probably don't have a screw to match, so you just delete those. And the thing, you can select and then hit delete here at the top. So you have to scroll down, and you can select multiples and then scroll up to the top to find the delete button. So you could get rid of all the colors that aren't necessary. Now the other thing to note is, so we want to make sure that we have every screw. If the screw is applying to a panel, make sure we have that color set up. Now one thing that comes up is, well, I have these frosted colors or these textured colors in my color list. So if I go over in colors, I would have some textured colors. So it automatically populates these screws as a color. And if you're using, like in black, you may have black frost metal, but you don't have a black frost screw. You're just going to use a standard screw. So you would have to just type in here the actual SKU and override it with. So it will fill this SKU in with CC as soon as I close this. It will add a CC to the end of it since I turn colors on. And when you do that, you would just take this, like the BK. So we have 101 HH and then it's BK. Maybe that's your part number. You would come down to the black frost and you have to just manually type that in. So it's 101 HH, and then we're just going to do the BK because we don't have a frost. So you just overwrite, and then these vendor SKUs are what show up in the job. So anytime I was using black frost, it would just report a black screw instead because that's the screw I use. So yeah, that's what vendor SKUs are kind of intended for. Anytime you have to do an override to get the real SKU that you need. So that's really quickly going over fasteners. You may also set up things like nails where they're in a box. Maybe there's a box of 200 or whatever. And another one that's really popular are like pass load nails, gun nails, where there's boxes of 2,000 and 3,000. And then your formula, again, it's much easier to set up those formulas in your packages if you have this quantity set for 2,000. So you just tell us, how many nails you want per square foot or lineal foot of the purlin or whatever, and then it accounts for this 2,000 box. So that makes your formulas and the setup of the formulas much easier. So now finishing up that, again, kind of doubling back there, you can download and upload and use the file that we have as an example to upload your fastener items. So moving over into hardware items, again, we have this generic database here that you can look at and get ideas off of. This is kind of what I would put in hardware, and maybe you're fine with a lot of these items. You can just change the name. change it to your part number. Again, same process. Just change the SKU to your SKU, change the name and maybe the cost, and just leave that be. And the reason, if you think, well, why would I want to reuse any of these? If you get over into packages or assemblies where these items are already set up, then it kind of gives you a head start of, okay, my nail package, like if I look at my framing package that I have here in this database, it's using a lot of these nails, things like that, where if you just reuse this one, when you get to that step, that package may already make sense and only need a few tweaks. So if I come down to my nail post frame package, I have these post frame items in here, gun nails and all that. So if I would have just changed this 3000 gun nail box to my part number, this package could just be kind of follow the same process and just work. So that's just a preview of why it helps to just leave those items and make them your own. Again, you're not forced to do that. If you come in here and you're like, I want a clean slate, I want to just wipe out all the hardware items and add my own, you're welcome to do that. You can just download our list and look at the columns you need and re-upload the correct columns. So those three categories, connectors, fasteners, and hardware, they all kind of work the same way. And they're very much related. The only difference with fasteners, they actually can have colors applied to them. And that's important because when we go back to this job here that we were looking at, you can see we're getting a color reported with these screws. So you don't have to do that. I have this bare pancake screw, just colors are turned off for it. So it's not reporting a color code at the end. Now, if you see this red color here, this Provia clay screw that it's trying to find, and that's just because, again, I left this one this way just so you can see what happens when you have a sheeting product. So in this job, I'm applying a vinyl siding to the wall, and it's trying to find a wall fastener. And again, this is a process where it was not set up correctly, and I want to show you what happens. So if it's trying to find a color, basically probably a clay, if I would go look at my Woodbinder 2-inch screws in the setup wizard, they probably don't have a Provia clay color. So if I go down and look, if I would go in here and look and open that up, maybe it's just metal colors and no vinyl colors. So that's where systems kind of tie back in. You can't, as of now, you can't put fasteners into a system. You just have to make sure you delete all the colors that don't apply to them. So when you turn on colors, you get all the colors, and you just have to manually delete out. Okay, I don't need them in. All these colors are bogus. I don't need these. Maybe it's a different color. So that's kind of the workaround that you can use there to get the correct colors and make sure. But yeah, after you get these set up and you get done with assemblies and all your packages, then you can come back in and you may realize, oh yeah, I need to add this color. And that's part of some of the next steps that we'll take in some of the next sessions. So it's kind of a preview there. So hopefully this will help everyone, and we will see you next time.